Thank you, Sean.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Milton Board of Appeals. Welcome to the 7 o'clock hearing on February 2nd, 2022. And this is the application of Comprehensive Land Holdings LLC. Their application to build approximately 16 units of rental apartments under the auspices of General Laws, Chapter 40B, Section 21, at 16 Amor Road in Milton, Massachusetts. The applicants represented by attorney Jesse Schomer of the Regnanti law firm. Mr. Schomer, welcome back to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good, there you are. Let me just also indicate that the panelists for this hearing will be Giselle Joffer and Brian Conley, both of whom are present. So are you all set to proceed, Mr. Schomer?
We are. I just noticed that we have one of our team members who's still in the
Is that Paul?
Paul Matos, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't
Thank you,
recognize.
Beverly.
Okay.
Maybe we can discuss a couple of procedural issues before we kick off here. I know there's been some discussion in the last day or so about a possible view of the subject premises. And the suggestion has been made, I think the last I heard was 11:30 on Saturday at the subject property, 16 Amor Road. Is that consistent with your understanding?
Yes, it is. That's agreeable to us if that time works for the board.
Okay. Let me ask you, have you been out to the site so that it's, you know, whether it's walkable or that the conditions are reasonably safe?
I have not been out to the site. I would turn it over to Joe Tamposi. I see he's on the call to see if he has any information about the condition. Joe?
I haven't been to the site since the most recent snowstorm. It's certainly walkable, but I'd bring snow boots.
Mm-hmm. How about safety considerations? Is there? I understand there's ledge on the site, and the terrain may be awkward in some positions on the site. So, the last thing I want to do is have somebody get hurt. So, do you intend in the view to traverse the perimeter of the site, or do you want the board members and any citizens to actually go onto the subject property and walk around?
Sure. So I think that, most of the site is visible, either from the road or from the front yard where it's cleared. Most of the site is already cleared. It's a single family home. It's currently rented. So I think that, we can certainly, be careful not to trek around in the wooded areas of the site and make sure that it's properly safety.
Okay, good. I appreciate that very much. Thank you, Mr. Tamposi. Let me just ask Mr. Schomer, Jesse, do you concur with Mr. Tamposi's view, and you believe that the view would be helpful to the board at this time, or would it be better to wait a week or 2 weeks? And of course, you could have more snow at that point in time. You never know, or it could be substantially melted. So, I mean, I think that's kind of your call.
I would, excuse me, I would defer to the board members' preferences in terms of the timing. For ourselves, we'll be out on the site at 936 Brush Hill Road, as well as 582 Blue Hill Avenue for different projects that same morning. So we'll all be in the area and ready to do a site walk. So if that works for the board members, that certainly does for us.
Okay, let me follow that up with the board members. Giselle, are you available Saturday at 11:30 to participate in a view?
This Saturday?
Yes.
I'm not. I could do a little bit later.
Okay, what time would be convenient to you?
Probably anytime after 1.
Okay. Mr. Schomer, do you intend to still, you and your crew expect to be in the area of the property still at 1 o'clock, or should we pick another date?
Well, I think at that point we would probably scatter for, for lunch and in case anybody has anything they need to take care of. But if the board members would like to proceed at 1, we can do that, or, we can do it another day. That's fine as well.
Okay. Let me check with Brian Conley.
I don't expect to be available Saturday, but I think you can go ahead and schedule the visit, and I can find a time to drive by and walk by the property, at a different time.
Mr. Chair, if I could just interject,
Sure.
I'm Ned Corcoran representing abutters to the property. I'm away this weekend. It would be helpful for me and my clients for me to have access to the site walk, I think. And unfortunately, I'm away Saturday through Wednesday. I would not be able to attend. So if the board could schedule for another time, that would be obviously convenient for me, but it's the board's, obviously it's the board's need to see the property that's most important.
How about a week from Saturday, Ned? Are you around?
I'm around that week and the following week. I think we have 2 more weekends before the next hearing. So
I believe that should work for us, Mr. Chair, and I'll ask my team members to get in touch with me directly during the hearing if they have any conflicts, so we can pick a time.
Okay, that's great. And Giselle, are you available a week from Saturday?
That's Saturday, February 12th.
Yes. Something like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning.
So I have a standing commitment on Saturdays from 10:30 to 11:30.
Okay.
Yeah, but I am available again on the afternoon.
Sometime like
Saturday,
1
February
o'clock.
12th.
1 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay. Let me see if Brian's available. Brian, are you available?
I can check. Would we ever do a weekday morning? Or these are always weekend events because of?
Well, I think Mr. Schomer and his team I think they're North Shore folks, and so that's
Okay. Let's go with the 12th then, if that's.
Just me, Mr. Chair, and that's just my office. I work out of Boston about half the time anyway. So
I'm
if
sorry.
you prefer to do it,
for you.
it's not inconvenient during the weekend or during the week. So if you prefer to do it during the week, that's fine.
Well, let's do this. Why don't you check with your crew and see if they're available a week from Saturday at 1 o'clock or something like that, and you can touch bases with Bev Sutton, and we'll see if we can pick a time or date and get the view over with. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
and thank you for the accommodation.
Sure, that's fine then. The other procedural issue here is our next scheduled hearing on this matter is the February 23rd. And that happens to fall within school vacation week, I'm told. And I understand that Brian Conley, one of our board members here, is going to be on vacation and would not be available for that hearing. So I guess my first question to Mr. Schomer is, as you know, Jesse, you know better than I do, you probably can cite the chapter and verse. It is procedurally proper for the board to go forward with just 2 members, as long as the absent member views the tape recording of the hearing and catches up and signs an affidavit or a statement to that effect that's filed with the board, with the records of the board. I didn't actually pick up that site before this hearing. I guess my question to you, Jesse, is do you prefer to have a full Board of Appeals present for the hearing of the proposed hearing on the 23rd, in which event it would have to be continued, or are you content with 2 members of the board and 1 member catching up with the proceeding?
I would say my preference would be to stick with the full board, just for the reason that since these hearings typically last up to 6 months or longer, there may come a time when one of the members has something it comes up at the last minute that can't be avoided. And then we would need to invoke the Mullen rule as you're just referring to that procedure in that instance. And that can only be done once for each member. So just to avoid any possibility of issues of notice down the road, I would say, why don't we just continue the next hearing by a week if we could, if that's available.
Yeah, see, that's what we're not going to be able to do, unfortunately. We have 3 matters that we're hearing in rotation. So the next scheduled hearing for 16 Amer Road after the 23rd would be March 16. So in other words, these hearings are being scheduled about every 3 weeks. And we've got the schedule planned right through July, and I really am very reluctant to
Can I chime in for just a second?
Sure, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think a solution here. So we're doing the sort of Wednesday 40B hearings for kind of simplicity and convenience's sake. This is probably the one hiccup. Well, not the one hiccup, that we have another school vacation in a couple months. I think the solution here is probably to just schedule it for the following week on a Tuesday or a Thursday. You know, depending on the other 40Bs, it wouldn't be, you know, obviously unheard of to have 2 40B hearings in a week. We've been doing it for a year. But I think, you know, sticking to the Wednesday schedule for the sake of doing it and then having 6 weeks between hearings, I think just bumping it to the next week might be a good solution for this instance.
Bev, do you have your calendar with you there?
Opening it right now.
And what do we have if we go on to the following?
What week is that? That'll be the first week in March.
Yes, I think it would be. Yes, the first week in March.
I think that Tuesday might be difficult because Tuesdays have been dedicated to the 648 Canton Avenue
That's
project,
correct.
and all of the same players are involved in that hearing.
As of now, we don't have a hearing scheduled for March,
No.
March the 1st in that. Currently, the public hearing is scheduled to close the week before. So that Tuesday may be open by March 1st.
Could be open, right?
How about the Thursday?
Yeah, I feel more secure with the Thursday.
Thursday, Thursday's open for me. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I hate to add an additional wrinkle, but I'm traveling that week. I'll be on the West Coast with work commitments from the 2nd to the 4th. So the Wednesday to the Friday.
You promised to come back.
I will come back for sure.
Okay, so
Well,
what
why
if
don't
we go back another week, Bev? Where are we?
Well, why don't, so the 2nd isn't March. So we are in. So March 1st, we're talking, right? 2nd or 3rd. Oh, no, yeah, so the 1st. Would that be too much, Giselle? The night before? Be pushing it a bit?
I'm reluctant to do it just because I don't know yet if I'm flying out that night or the following morning.
So we'll go to the next week.
Go to the following week, sure.
Yeah.
What date are we talking, Bev?
That Tuesday. Because I can work around that with Canton Avenue. I can just say it's booked and we just do another. Oh no, we're all set with that, Jesse. I'm sorry. Want to do
Well,
just
even if we were not closed by the 8th, we could certainly work around the 8th.
That's what I'm thinking.
On the 648 Canton Avenue.
Yeah, because it's nothing scheduled, so we can
Right.
book the 8th. Would that work?
That certainly works for me. Thank you.
Works for me.
Giselle? Work for
Yes,
you?
and for me, thank you.
Okay, Brian, how about you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so that'd be March 8th. Is that a Thursday, Bev?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Tuesday, March 8th at 7 o'clock.
Correct.
And Ned, that's good for you.
That's fine with me. That's right.
How about Tim? Is that acceptable to you?
They're all acceptable to me, Mr. Chair. So
Okay, so that'll be on next continuance date, and so okay, that's that's fine. I think thanks to everyone for their cooperation, and I guess if we have no further ado, let me just check. Mr. Schomer, do you want to make an opening statement and begin your, maybe you can give us an outline as to what evidence you're going to present tonight, and we can start with that.
Sure, thank you very much. I'll be very brief and then turn it over to my team members who know far more about these things than I do. So my name, again, for the record, for everyone's benefit, my name is Jesse Schomer. I'm an attorney at Rignanti Stereo. I represent 16 Amel Road LLC, the applicant in this proceeding. Beverly, if you could, we have one more team member who I see still on the panelist list. She just raised her hand. Her name is Jillian Tomaselli from Embark Architecture.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize her name. Okay.
So if I could ask at this time for my team members to pop up on camera so I can introduce you all. We're represented tonight, Mr. Chair, by, where do you go? Tim Loringer from Embark Architecture, as well as Jillian Tomaselli from Embark Architecture. They're the architects of record. We're represented tonight by Paul Matos of Allen and Major Associates Engineering. They're the civil engineers of record on this project. And we're also represented tonight by Natalie Adams of Verdant Landscape Architecture out of Brookline. They are the landscape architects of record. Also with us tonight is Dan Dume of MDM Transportation. They are transportation safety and traffic consultants. And I would like to, if I may, Mr. Chair, proceed from starting from really what's seen above the ground, namely the architecture of the buildings and what's proposed for the site, then move from there to landscape architecture, then get into the civil engineering details, and then finally end with the traffic and safety aspect of the project, if that's agreeable to the board.
That's perfectly agreeable. Just let me ask you for an estimate as to whether you think you can accomplish the testimony of these four witnesses this evening, or you're going to have two this evening and continue it over, or?
What we would like to do, if we may, Mr. Chair, we would like to do an overview and I say 10,000 foot level and go through all of the disciplines and really just give the board an overview. And then in future sessions, delve into the details on each specific discipline as it comes up.
Okay, that sounds like a great idea. And it may also be helpful for any citizens who are listening to the program, giving them a view of future proceedings is probably a very logical way to do it. So why don't you proceed in the order that you choose? Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Well, I'll keep my remarks very brief. So the project, as you all know, that we're presenting tonight is located at Brush Hill 16 Amor Road, which is at the intersection of Amor Road, Brush Hill Road, and Truman Parkway. The site is located about a mile from Mattapan Square MBTA station. It's, as the crow flies, about 200 feet from the city limits of the city of Boston, and it's just down the street from the MBTA 716 bus station, bus stop, that is. So the location it's fairly accessible, we think, by walking and by bicycling to a lot of amenities in Mattapan and Hyde Park. And the site is also across the street from a multimodal biking and recreational walking, running trail in the Neponset River Reservation. So there's pretty ample amenity spaces and recreational area in the location of this site. If I may, I'd like to very briefly share my screen, Mr. Chair, if that's acceptable to you, just to give you a little overview here. And don't worry, Tim, I'm not going to steal your thunder this time. I've got a different graphic to show. So can everyone see this image here from BPTA image of the site? I can see it. Okay,
excellent. So my cursor here is zooming in on the site here. This is 16 Amor Road. From an aerial view. Over here across the Neponset River is the city of Boston, and down here is Milton. And this is how the site looks today. And I'll pan over here to give you an image of what the neighborhood looked like in 1955. And this really gives a great snapshot for what this location is and how we're thinking about it in terms of appropriate density. So this location over here, this is what existed in the town of Milton pretty much pre-war. This represents the historical structures from the 1800s, early 1900s up to World War II. And actually this here is the house at 16 Amore Road, which was built in 1955. This entire property here was a farm at that time, and one of the streets in the area is named for the former owner, Hollingsworth. So this is our building here. If we move forward, I'll put up a different image here to give you a sense of how the area changed. And this really gives a snapshot for what happened when Milton enacted zoning in the early 20th century. This area here was downzoned into creating large single-family lots at a much lower density than the neighborhood around it had been previously developed. And our site here is right at the edge of that. So we're really at a very transitional area. And we feel like this neighborhood here is as part of the site location and neighborhood as these homes down in this area here. So I think that gives a bit of historical context for the neighborhood and the site that we're proposing to develop. And I'll stop share there. So the site itself is about a builder's acre. It's 40,000 square feet and change. It's developed with one single family home with a large backyard. The proposed project that we're presenting tonight, and Tim and Jillian will go into this further, is for 16 residential apartments. The proposed site is 4 street-facing single-family home style units at the front of the site to present the street view of the project as more of a low-density residential project. And at the rear of the site are 2 proposed townhouse buildings containing 6 units each. Now, all of the buildings that we're proposing are 2 stories in height. The maximum height of any of the buildings is 31 feet, and most of them are somewhere in the range of 27 feet to about 30 feet. So all of the buildings we're proposing are within the by right height and stories limits under the local zoning bylaw in this area, which requires 2.5 stories or 35 feet. So all the units are both compliant with both of those requirements. The site is laid out with an entrance on Amore Road, and towards the center of the site, there are 31 proposed parking spaces, which includes 4 garage spaces for each of these single family home style units. And the rest is surface spaces. And that parking is only 1 space fewer than the zoning requirement, which would require 2 spaces per unit. So at 31 spaces, we're proposing a parking ratio of 1.94 spaces per unit, which is very generous, particularly given the accessibility to public transit in this area. So as I said, I won't steal the consultant's thunder. I'll let the designers go into the details, but if I may, Mr. Chair, I'd like to hand it over to Joe Tamposi to say a few words about the project. And Joe, please take it away.
Great, thank you, Jesse. I want to thank the board and everyone in attendance tonight. As Jesse said, my name is Joe Tamposi, and I'm here on behalf of Comprehensive Land Holdings. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you tonight, present the project at 16 Amore Road. I think Jesse did a great job of summarizing the project, but we're really excited about how this design, the efforts that our team has put in to make sure that this project is really thoughtful in blending affordable multifamily housing into the neighborhood context, that context that includes both the higher density to the north of the site as well as lower density further south. So this project was originally granted site eligibility for mass housing almost a year ago in February of 2021. Following that process and the town comments that we received and citizens comments we received, we made some important changes to the site design before submitting our comprehensive permit in July of last year. So we gave a lot of careful thought to the access and traffic safety along Brush Hill Road by making that a gated access. We also developed an extensive landscaping and screening plan to make sure that the buildings are well screened from neighbors. Since July, we made another round of project revisions in December of last year to proactively address additional comments and concerns and overall improve the project. We adjusted the layout of the single-family style units in the front to better work with the site and present a really beautiful facade along Amore Road. We also improved the landscape plans to provide improved screening and support the residential living. And we also re-reviewed all of the engineering and stormwater management on the site, completely again, to make the design more robust and make sure that we're properly handling and treating all of our stormwater runoff. So in short, this project, our team has put a tremendous amount of time, effort, and energy to make sure that this affordable housing that's so important and needed in Milton will get created in a carefully designed and well thought out manner. Looking at the board, none of us here are strangers to the 40B process. We understand it can get contentious, emotions can run high, and change is difficult. However, we firmly believe that this change of bringing more rental housing and more affordable housing to Milton is fundamentally a good thing. Giving more people and more families the privilege to live in a high opportunity town like Milton is the reason that 40B was created in the first place. So we're really excited to present the project in greater detail, and we look forward to the board's review and helping to shape the best project possible. With that, I'll turn it over to our architecture team at Embark to get into the details. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Temposi. We appreciate your presentation and your presence.
Thank you for that, Joe and Jesse. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening to members of the board and members of the public. My name is Tim Laranger, representing Embark. Also with me is my colleague, Jillian Tomaselli. And I'm going to start off our presentation here with a brief overview of our take on the context and our approach to the site. And then I'll turn it over to Jillian to kind of go into the plans and elevations in a bit more detail. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen here.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
And can everyone see that?
I can see it. That's fine.
Excellent. So context-wise, Jesse kind of started to get into this a little bit, but 16 Amber Road here, kind of at the north portion of Milton, just over the river from Hyde Park. We're about just under a mile from Mattapan, and also just about a mile from other commuter rail stations at Blue Hill, Hyde Park, and Fairmount. So the amount of kind of accessibility to transit via bike and walking is pretty high on this site. And then at the very other end of Amber Road, from where we are along at the intersection of Blue Hill, is the bus stop for the 716 bus. That's within a half mile itself, which brings you directly to Mattapan. Kind of moving on a little bit closer to the site now. Site the intersection of Brush Hill, Truman, and Amber Road. We kind of are the buffer between the high frequency, kind of high density parkway here and the kind of more residential area of Amber Road. And then, as Jesse was noting, the kind of where the two kind of different development patterns meet at Amber Road itself. Looking at the site survey and on the screen here, Amber Road to the south, Brush Hill is to the left. Amber Road is to the bottom of the page, Brush Hill Road is to the left, and north is kind of the top left corner. The site itself is about 270 by 150 feet, just over 40,000 square feet. There is a grade change from the kind of western corner to the eastern corner that it raises pretty significantly towards the center of the site and then kind of flattens out a little bit. So we're working with the grade, and the townhouse approach and the individual detached units kind of allow us to step with the grade naturally without too much excavation. But there's not so much grade that we're going to have a buried parking structure or any kind of basement structure. We kind of take advantage of it where we can, but all in all are kind of using it as it naturally stands. And then, as noted, our site access will be off of Amber Road itself, relatively close to where the existing driveway is. We're actually pushing it a little bit further from the intersection, so that's going to create an extra level of safety there from that high traffic intersection. There will be a secondary means of access off of Brush Hill, but it will be emergency access only, and it will be gated. So moving on. Here's just some images. There is an existing fence along the corner of Brush Hill and Amber with some pretty heavy vegetation. We're going to be removing that fence to kind of create more visual presence at the intersection, but maintaining as much as that kind of vegetative buffer as we can for the sake of the new residents. And some other views here, kind of looking further up Amber and then looking back toward Brush Hill, showing that kind of large growth of vegetation from the inside of the site. And then a few more views here, looking further down Amber Road, looking back towards Brush Hill, the existing house and driveway, and then the bottom two images here are from the rear of the site. You can generally see the gentle sloping nature of the site with some of that vegetation towards the rear, and then more of the vegetation that's kind of along the southeast portion, along as you further down Amber Road. So going into a little bit more detail about the difference in the zoning between these two portions of the city. The older section that Jesse was highlighting is a residential C district with a minimum lot area of 7,500 square feet and a minimum lot frontage of 75 square feet. That's compared to 40,000 square feet and 150 feet of frontage in the residential A district that Amber Road sits in. So just from that, you can see the difference in development pattern that would create. We wanted to look at that in a little more detail in terms of how that creates a different architecture that we can pull from, and what that difference in kind of history and density would create architecturally. So looking at just one block up from Amber Road, in that residential C district, the houses are much smaller lots, much smaller front setbacks and side setbacks, minimum yard space. As Jesse noted, kind of early 20th century development, lots of 2- and 3-story buildings. The third story is often within the roof structure. Material-wise, clapboard, a lot of shingle siding, traditional double hung windows, gable and hip roofs, often the gable profile roof facing the street. And then there's sidewalks on the streets with prominent pedestrian access to each home with minimum driveway, almost no garages. Compared to Amber Road itself, and this is taken, these photos are a little bit further down Amber Road, which have the large lots, large yards, particularly at the front, private driveways, private garages, no sidewalks, more mid-century development, and that kind of comes through in the style of the ranch and the split level, sort of 2 stories, 1.5 story design with a lower profile roof, mostly clapboard siding, less of kind of the more traditional shingle siding. And then kind of larger windows. So we think both of those styles, just aesthetically, can kind of play into how we were going to approach the building. We can get into that more when we get to the elevations. But overall design goals for the site, we want to maintain the scale and height of the neighborhood context on all sides. And while being a multi-family project, we're generally denser than the rest of Amber Road. The individual elements, the individual buildings within it, we want to maintain that kind of 2-story height. And that same scale of footprint as the rest of the context. And then from a materials, form, and style, we wanted to emulate the kind of residential nature of the rest of the context, being still a residential property. We wanted to contain the parking towards the interior of the site to kind of reduce the visual and nuisance impact on the butters that the parking would create, while still maintaining that kind of high parking ratio we were aiming for. As mentioned before, it will be accessed off of Amber Road. And then just to kind of got into this a little bit, but the portion of the project along Amber Road is the detached units. We thought we wanted to front Amber with the detached units because it played into the rest of the character of that street more instead of having kind of that more multifamily townhouse feel. In addition to that, we also face the units toward the street. So the front entry of those units is off of Amber. We extended the existing sidewalk from Brush Hill and kind of wrap the corner up Amber where there isn't an existing sidewalk to kind of create that front sidewalk condition. We didn't want those units to kind of turn their back on Amber itself. We wanted to front Amber. And beyond that, as mentioned before, just kind of maintain the vegetation buffer on all sides, particularly against Brush Hill where we have that kind of the high traffic area. So from there, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Julian Tomaselli, and she can go through the site plan and other plans in a little more detail here.
Thanks, Tim. Hey, everybody. So I'm going to start with our proposed site plan. So just to locate everybody, we've got Amber Road running along the bottom of the sheet, and then Brush Hill Road over on the left of the page. So our proposed plan consists of 16 total units. We have 4 detached single-family homes, and then the 12 townhomes split up into 2 buildings. And our units are a mix of 2, 3, and 4-bedroom residences. So the layout of the site, we basically have 2 rows of housing with our parking sandwiched in between to keep it less visible. So our, like Tim said, our 4 single-family homes, which are, you know, more in context with the rest of the neighborhood, those are along Amber Road, along the more visible edge. And then inside we have our parking, and then along the back we have our row of more dense, the more dense townhomes. This site is accessed from Amber Road at the far edge of the property. And that's important to note because we're trying to give as much distance here between the entrance to this property and the intersection at Brush Hill and Amber Road for safety concerns. We are providing an emergency access back out onto Brush Road, but that is purely for emergencies and maintenance vehicles. It'll otherwise be gated. So the residents living here would enter and exit by Amber Road. So our setbacks, we are, you know, we're pretty dense on this site, but we do have, so at the front property line, we have about a 4-foot setback. And then at the back, we're about 13 feet. And then to either side, we're 17 and 19 feet. We did try to pull those front townhomes to the right to allow for some of the existing vegetation to be maintained at that corner of Brush Hill Road and Amber Road. And then just an overview of the breakdown of the unit types and parking summary. So we have the 2, 3, and 4-bedroom, like I said, and then overall we have 31 parking spaces. And then you can see that 23 of these are surface spaces, and then the driveway, which we'll get more into with the blown-up plans. Next one. So here's an aerial perspective of the site, taken looking at the intersection of Brush Hill and Amber Road. So you can see the 4 single-family homes along Amber Road. Again, these are a little more in context with what we're seeing in the rest of the neighborhood. And then we have our denser townhomes along back. The parking is sandwiched in between so that it's a little less visible from the road. And then here you can also see the emergency access onto Brush Hill Road, but it is gated. All right, so here we're zoomed into our first floor so we can see a little more detail. So again, you can see those 4 buildings along Amber Road. Those are each 4-bedroom homes. They're oriented with the front door to the street, and they have access to the sidewalk there. But the garages are accessed from the back, so they're accessed from the interior of the site so that we cut down on, we only have the 2, so we're cutting down on the curb cuts to the site. Each of those 4 homes have 1 dedicated driveway space and then 1 dedicated garage space. So those each have like a 2-to-1 ratio. Each of those homes also have an outdoor patio out back, so they do have some outdoor space for each of them. Then along the rear of the site, we have our townhomes. These are a mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms. There are 3 3-bedroom units and 9 2-bedroom units. These townhomes all front into the inside of the site, so for ease of access with the parking and everything, with the parking. But they each do also have their own dedicated outdoor space out back with the small patios. So here we can get a better and easier breakdown of our parking. We have the 23 surface spaces that are in front of the townhomes, and these are broken up by parking islands. We've got 2 accessible spaces, and then we have 2 spots for each of the single-family homes, 1 garage, 1 driveway. So overall, Jesse had mentioned we have a 1.94 parking ratio. Here you can also see some of our proposed site utilities. So When you enter the site, along that edge, we have our trash enclosure as well as bike parking. And then on the other end, again, the gated emergency access, more possibility for bike parking, and then our transformer tucked into the corner. Okay, so our second floor plan, not too much more to say here. Again, we have a mix of 2, 3, and 4 bedroom apartments. And this is the top floor, two stories only for everything. So here is a section of the site cut lengthwise through the site, so northwest to southeast. At the bottom on the left, you can see Brush Hill Road, and the site slopes gently up. It's about like roughly 15 feet. And you can see that our townhouses step up with the site so that they remain about the same height relative to the ground. So the max height, like Jesse said, is about 31 feet, but really we're closer to 29 feet above Brush Hill at the bottom, and I believe 25 feet up at the top. And then here is another site section cutting the opposite way. So you can see, so Amma Road is over on the right, and then we cut through the single family homes, the parking in the middle, and then the townhouses. And I think it's important to note here that, we're pretty in scale with the other houses in the neighborhood, all about 2 stories. You can also see that we're a little bit set into the site, into the slope with those townhouses out back. So those are a little, they're going to appear a little bit shorter than they are. Here we have some some precedents for the design. The style that we're looking at was a modern transitional design. We wanted to respect the context of the surrounding neighborhood. So we're using traditional materials like lap siding and board and batten siding and traditional gable forms, but overall clean lines and some smaller modern touches like the windows. And then on the next slide, so you can see that directly reflected in the single family homes. So that sort of modern farmhouse style. We have a very simple volume, very gable style building. The materials that we're proposing are fiber cement lap siding, some fiber cement board and batten accents, and then asphalt shingle roofing. And then our design precedents for the townhouses out back are similar in that they're a modern transitional design, but with a little bit more of a modern flair to them because it is a different home type. So still in keeping with the traditional materials and the traditional forms, but a little bit more modern interpretation of how those items are detailed, like around the windows. And again, you can see that reflected in the elevation of the townhouses. So we have very simple volumes, a gable building, but a little bit more of a modern style. The materials and the color palette and the roof line are all directly relating to the detached single family homes up front, but they are a little bit different flair, again, so that it doesn't look like the same, the same building stamped around. So traditional materials we're using the fiber cement lap siding, fiber cement single siding, and then a little more modern touches with the windows. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Tim.
Thank you, Jillian. So here we're just looking at, we have a couple of perspective renderings here. This is from the corner of Brush Hill and Amma Road. So you can see the detached homes at the front of the site stepping up the hill. You can see the emergency gated access here. As noted, we're going to maintain as much of the existing vegetation here as possible. For the purpose of this image, we're kind of ghosting it in so you can still see the the kind of the scope and extent of the townhouses that you see to the rear here, but in reality, you wouldn't really be able to see that. We're also noting that we're turning as you, I don't know if you caught it in the existing conditions photo, but we can see this in the sidewalk as well, but the sidewalk currently does not extend off Amber Road and kind of ends at the intersection. So we're wrapping the sidewalk to capture those 4 units at the front as well. And then from Amber Road, kind of looking back in the direction, you can see from the key down here, you can see the site access with the curb cut a little bit further up the hill from where the existing driveway is. And similar to the previous image, there will be some new and existing vegetation here, as well as a kind of 6-foot tall board fence to kind of provide privacy for the existing adjacent abutter, and kind of cut down on noise and any kind of vehicle headlights of cars exiting the parking area. But for the purpose of this image, we kind of ghosted that in so you can see kind of the scale of those townhouses towards the rear. And then there'd also be some new planting, some low ground cover planting, shrubs, bushes, as well as some trees between Amber Road and the townhouses and the detached units where there's no current planting, but we can allow. I won't get too much into the landscaping yet. And then kind of finally here for the architecture presentation is just a couple quick shadow studies. So we took these at 3 times of year. The first one here is the summer solstice. We also have the fall spring equinox, and then the winter solstice. So what you're looking at is shadows from each hour of the day overlaid on top of each other. So where you have kind of the darker opacity is where you're in shadow more. And then this kind of orangey red yellow line represents the path of the sun throughout the day. So this is the east-west axis, and you can kind of see how far beyond that axis the sun gets at sunrise and sunset. North here again, same orientations to the top left of the screen. So with 15 hours or so of sunlight during the summer solstice, you're going to have deeper shadows kind of to the direct east and west, where we have minimal impact on abutters, and then very minimal shadow kind of directly to the north as the sun is extremely high on the horizon during those kind of middle hours of the day. For instance, for a 30-foot high building at noon on the summer solstice would only cast a 10-foot shadow, which would be within our own property line. So this one represents the equinox here taken on March 21st, about 12 hours of daylight, about equal, the sun about even with the east-west horizon. You get much less impact to the east to west, a little bit more to the north, but still minimal impact on the abutter adjacent to us on Brush Hill. And then the winter shadows with a very, very narrow arc on the horizon, only about 9 hours of sunlight throughout the day. Most shadow impact would be to the north, very little to the east and west as the sun doesn't get far enough east and west on the horizon. But even still, again, you can see here the roof line. What shadow impact we do on the property doesn't affect the house itself. You can see the roof line is still in sunshine here. And the shadow you see on this roof is actually from the chimney of the house. So we still kind of mostly just cast shadow on the ground. And I'll note that these don't take into effect the existing vegetation that's on the site, which obviously casts its own shadow. So this is just structures and the impact of the buildings themselves. So with that kind of wraps up architecture. I can hand it over to Natalie Adams with Verdant Landscape Architecture now.
Yeah, let's hold on for 1 second. Just to,
sure.
I don't know. Your presentation is very preliminary, and we appreciate that. It gives us a great overview. But let me just see if any of the board members have any questions on your preliminary presentation. So Giselle, do you have any questions of the MBAC personnel in the presentation?
No, not so far. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Conley, Brian Conley, do you have any questions of MBAC?
You're on mute, Brian.
Sorry, if only that was the first time someone had said that to me today. I had a question about the trees, but I think we're going to hear from the landscape architect, and so maybe I'll hold that question until that presentation.
Okay, then that's fine. Tim Sosinski, do you have any questions on the preliminary presentation by MBUC?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Corcoran, how about you? Do you have any questions on the preliminary?
I have one on the preliminary. Where do the children play? There's no green space identified for children. I'm assuming with 3 and 4 bedroom units, there'll be a lot of children here. Where they play and where would they play safely? This
Okay.
is, as they noted, a very dangerous intersection. I think there'll be a lot of activity happening proximate to that intersection.
Okay, that's a good question. Maybe it's going to be handled in more detail in the later presentation, but Tim Loninger, do you have any comments on preliminary where the kids are going to play and safely?
We don't have any dedicated playground areas here. We do have a little bit of open space dedicated to each individual unit, and we do have some space between the buildings that we can try to program further as we kind of develop a little bit further and get a little bit further in the process. But we don't have like a dedicated playground space itself.
Okay, is that something that's under consideration, or is it just?
Yeah, the areas between. I mean, we have the. I guess this plan works here, but we have the space between the 2 townhouses, and then between each of the detached units that has potential to be programmed exterior space. That's we're just kind of showing us some light landscaping at the moment. I don't think the areas towards the end of the sites would be appropriate for play, as noted, they're kind of along the sidewalk, and they're along the road, and we want to kind of the presence along the road. We want to have like a visual presence. We're not going to have that all fenced off. But there is some opportunities kind of in the kind of residual space between the buildings that we can.
Okay, so you can give that further consideration when we're getting to a more formal presentation, and be prepared to answer that.
Mr. Chair, if I might also just add, I did want to add that this site is less than a mile walk with sidewalks to the Kelly Playground. So while there may not be open space on site, there is less than a mile away to public open space, large playgrounds and fields.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Tamposi. We appreciate. Jesse, who are you going to offer for your preliminary remarks on the next subject matter?
Next up, Mr. Chair, is landscape architecture, and that's Natalie Adams from Verdant Landscape Design.
Well, Ms. Adams, welcome.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Natalie Adams from Verdant Landscape Architecture. What you're looking at right now is the landscape plan with Amar Road at the bottom, and sheet left is where Brush Hill Road is. I'd like to start off by saying that we are embracing the eco-country garden aesthetic for a landscape aesthetic on this site, and that's really loose and informal, and we're using habitat enhancing plantings that support pollinators and birds, and we're also doing these kind of very loose informal plantings at the patio areas, and we're providing pervious pavers at the patios, at the ground floor units. Let's see, and another important point is we're mitigating the development from the neighbors by preserving as many of the trees for screening to the abutters at the north and east. We're also installing a wood board fence along the abutter line on the north and east. Yes, thank you. I'd like to mention, just as an overall, 99 to 100% of the plants we use will be plants native to this region. And I think that's very important, and people really appreciate that. Who's got the cursor? Can you just show where the existing trees are at the corner of Brush Hill and Amore, that group right there, and there's another group right over there. And then we have some back in the corner there, although some of them might not be on this property. And these we're really trying to, we're protecting these trees. And so someone once said to me, the most important tree is an existing tree. So we have these existing trees we're really protecting, but I'd like to mention that the trees along Amar Road, we're using, we're really planting these large trees that are they're oak trees, which is what this forest is in this region, is an oak forest. So we're planting these oak trees, and they're going to really create this canopy over the road that's really missing in a lot of these mid-century developments. They've just leveled it to lawn. So these trees are really going to embrace that canopy. And we're also doing that along the parking area in the middle. Those are very large London plane trees. And then you also notice at the patios, at the single families, who's got the cursor? Yes, the patio areas. This is very loose and informal with those pollinator loving plants that we're using, and very accessible. I don't think we've got any stairs at any of these single family homes here. Let me look at my notes. So tree protection, maintain as many as the mature trees along the edges of the property as feasible. Streetscape and yard frontage. I'd like to say about those single family homes along Amar Road is we're really embracing that single family aesthetic right there for the landscaping, creating these little garden moments right there at the front entry walk. And the screening and the fencing and additional evergreen plantings along that north property line of the abutter up there. You can see all those evergreen plantings up in through there. So we're breaking, and each of the units itself, each of those little patio units is broken up by a little evergreen garden between the units and a fence between those as well. It's hard to see at this scale. I think I have some more pages, and we've really done a great job with the planting plan on this. Did you include the other page? Yes, here it is. So you can see this is L2, and you can see, we have an image on the left of Amar Road, and then we have an image of a London plane tree and how it has that great bark. And we've got sugar maples we're proposing for the site, and those are native. And the Pinus strobus, this is a white pine, and that really is a great buffer tree. And then there's the quercus, the oak. That one's a pin oak there. So as we're looking at those single family homes right there, you'll notice between the homes, we've got kind of a evergreen plantings that are, it's a buffer between the homes, but they're kind of skewed a little bit, and they're just skewed up a little bit so that, the kids can still go in back and forth playing a game of tag or whatever. And then we have, let's go on to L3. And then to look at this is our tone homes, and you can see the whole plant list has been really developed. So if anyone's interested in really drilling down on that, I'd be happy to answer any questions for that. And we're also adding to the buffer at the roadside there, we're adding some Pinus strobus, and those are those white pines that are really gonna screen and buffer the townhomes from the road. And that concludes the landscape architecture presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your presentation. Let's see if anyone has any preliminary questions for you.
Okay.
Giselle, do you have any questions of Ms. Adams?
No, thank you.
Okay, Brian Connolly, please.
Yes, thanks for the presentation. Will we be receiving plans that identify the existing trees that'll be preserved?
Yes, we haven't yet done that plan, but I can accomplish that next week.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Mr. Sosinski, do you have any questions of Ms. Adams?
None right now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Corcoran, do you have any preliminary questions of Ms. Adams?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First question would be relative to this tree survey that Ms. Adams has just indicated she would perform. It would be appreciated if she would survey the trees that are along the edge of the property on the other side of the property lines. In particular, I note that there are pretty hefty retaining walls that are being proposed for substantially up against the property line. It's likely that any trees that exist on the other side of the property line will not survive that construction. Any roots that extend into this property would be damaged, and those trees would not survive. And I think it would be important for this board to request a very healthy and mature tree preservation plan with significant penalties associated with the loss of any of those trees.
Mr. Corcoran, Natalie Adams, do you think, you've been on the Canton development, and I was wondering, we did a tree survey there, and we talked about the critical root zone of trees and how much roots, how wide that zone is to protect the tree. So I'm thinking from our property line to about 20 foot into the neighbor's property line might include that. Does that sound like doable?
I think that would be, I think that'd be an appropriate uh, bandwidth to survey trees into abutting property so that we know, what's there and what their canopy widths are.
Great. Excellent. I'll talk about it with the development team. Thank you.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Corcoran. So, Mr. Shoma, who do you have next up at bat?
Next up to bat, Mr. Chair, is Paul Matos of Allen and Major to get into the civil engineering and stormwater.
Okay.
Good evening, Paul Matos with Allen and Major Associates. I will be sharing my screen to provide grading plans and utility plans.
Good. Welcome to the board. Why don't you proceed with your presentation?
So on my screen here, I got my grading plan. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more to get everybody a good detail of what's going on here. As you can see, the way we graded the site, we try to maintain the existing gutter flows on Amore Road and also on Brush Hill Road. We sloped the driveway entrances to be 1.5% towards the property line. And then we maintain a leveling area for vehicle access for 2% for the first 40 to 50 feet. And then after that, we graded the slope up, increased to 5% all the way up to Brush Hill Road. And then again, from Brush Hill Road, we provided that level landing area for vehicles to maneuver onto Brush Hill Road. Since we have the flat leveling areas at the entrances, we located our ADA spaces at the two corners of the parking lot, one here on the south side of the property, and then we provided another ADA spot on the northerly side of the property. For stormwater, the stormwater management system consists of deep sump hooded catch basins with manholes and piping. And then we also proposed 4 individual subsurface infiltration fields located in the parking lot. We got field 1 here, field 2, field 3, and field 4. Each of these subsurface infiltration fields consist of StormTech plastic arch chambers, and those systems will be designed for infiltration. For treatment, again, we have the deep sump hooded catch basins, we have the isolator row, and the StormTech plastic chambers providing over 80% TSS removal in accordance with Mass DEP Stormwater Handbook. We're also providing recharge in accordance with the MS4 general permit, which requires us to provide recharge of a minimum 1 inch over the entire impervious surfaces. Other improvements to the utilities on the property here is that we're proposing connections to the municipal water and sewer. We also have a gas connection and electrical. Individual single units on Amore Road will have all their connections off of Amore Road. And then the townhouse units will be providing gas along the southerly property line and into the individual units, into the meters. The electrical transformer will be located at the northeasterly corner by Brush Hill Road and providing electrical services to the buildings along the easterly property line. And sewer, again, will be located on the easterly property line, providing individual connections to the townhouse units, and water will be connected off Brush Hill Road. That concludes the civil portion of it, dealing with stormwater and utilities and grading.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Matos. That's very helpful. Let me see if there are any preliminary questions from the board members and other interested persons. Giselle, do you have any questions of Mr. Matos?
I do. This might be more appropriately posed to Mr. Dumais, or Dumais, who's coming up next, but I'm guessing, Mr. Matos, that you have a sort of a sense as to the spacing. It feels to me that there's a lot going on this property. Maybe it just looks that way, but I'm wondering when the cars are parked in the spots on either side, if there's room to go in between. So for emergency access, for example, and also how that might impact sort of the ability to dig if you need to for purposes of accessing drainage, et cetera.
For transportation, I will defer that to Dan from MDM. He will be able to explain vehicle movements here and stuff like that. But there's sufficient room on the plan for parking and access to get in and out of the site.
Paul, can you go over what the dimensions of those spaces are? We'll show the auto turn of the fire and emergency apparatus coming up.
Yes, just bear with me 1 second. I just need to go to my layout plan, so hold on. Yeah, parking spaces are all 8.5 by 19, which in compliance with town of Milton's regulations for parking. And then the ADA spaces will be on the southerly side. We have an 8.5-foot wide spot with an 8-foot accessible spot for a van. And then on the northerly side, we have an 8.5-foot spot with a 5-foot accessible aisle for a standard vehicle.
So for the size spaces, they're standard size spaces, so they're not compact or anything. So they're fully in compliance with the size spaces needed for a residential, pretty low turnover development.
Okay. And I think what I may have been misunderstanding is I thought the single family home cars would be sort of parking opposite, but do they have garages?
Yes, they have each an individual driveway and then the garage.
Okay.
So they have
Got
2
it.
spaces each.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Brian Connolly, do you have any questions of Mr. Matos?
No, I mean, we'll look forward to getting the full, civil plans and having Sean Reardon's review to help us understand them. Thanks.
Tim Szynski, do you have any preliminary questions of Mr. Matos on civil engineering?
None right now, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Corcoran, how about you? Do you have any preliminary questions of Mr. Matos?
I do. I did submit a memorandum with a couple of site plans with it to the board for its consideration. But one of the things that we've highlighted early on is that there were only two test pits taken on the property. They were taken during the drought conditions of August of 2019. Similar set of preliminary test pits were taken at 648 Canton Avenue in September of 2019. And in each of those cases, it demonstrated that the groundwater was well below the surface of the land. In February of 2020, this applicant conducted a second set of test pits over at Canton Avenue, and it turned out that groundwater was less than 2 feet below the surface. There are no additional pits here. I'm just wondering, whether there is a plan for additional test pits to determine where is the seasonal high groundwater table. I think that if this site is consistent with most of us sites in Milton, seasonal high groundwater is much closer to the surface. It's more likely to be at 2 feet. There's a significant slope that comes down the hill. The area at the bottom of the left side of the property, the Brush Hill Road side of the property, probably has groundwater that's just below the surface when it's seasonal high water. And I'm wondering how they could use an infiltration plan when the storm chambers are likely to be set below the level of the groundwater. And I think that's an important consideration for Mr. Reardon to review in his review of the plans on behalf of the board.
Okay, thank you, Ned. Mr. Matos, I know this is a preliminary presentation you made, and do you have any additional test pits that you plan to take and analyze at an appropriate time or an appropriate seasonal time? Do you want to briefly or generally address Mr. Corcoran's issue about test pits and drought conditions and the water levels?
Well, the test pits are typically done by a soil evaluator that's licensed in the state of Massachusetts. And the soil evaluator, when he's doing his test pits, he looks for redox features in the soils, also called modeling, and that determines where the estimated seasonal high water table is. So it wouldn't matter if there's a drought or not, because the the soil would have been marked already previously, and that would determine where the estimated seasonal high water table is. So I believe the test bits that were done previously were done correctly, and that made a determination on where the water table was, that we didn't observe any water table on the 2 test bits that we did, and both test bits were done over, one was 9 feet deep, and then the other one was just over 11 feet deep.
I would just comment back on that, Mr. Chair. Over on the Canton Avenue project, their initial design, when they filed with Mass Housing in early 2020, relied on the initial set of test pits that show the groundwater was substantially below the surface. After they conducted the second set of test pits with groundwater set at less than 2 feet from the surface of the ground, they redesigned their stormwater system. We're now unfortunately on a 3rd and 4th set of designs for stormwater, but there was a significant change in the design between what was filed with Mass Housing in that case, and then what was initially filed with the Board of Appeals with the comprehensive permit application. And a lot of that was directly driven by where was the groundwater actually within the ground. And so I think it's a very, very important issue. It needs to be looked at very carefully. And I think it's very likely that the groundwater conditions here are substantially the same as the groundwater conditions at 648 Canton Avenue and every other location in town that is being studied for this purpose.
Well, thank you for your comments, Mr. Corcoran. Mr. Meadows, let me just ask you a question. You seem to feel that the test bits that you did do are reasonable and adequate. But putting that issue aside, if you were to take a second look at the groundwater issue and test bits, when would be an appropriate time of the year for that type of testing to take place?
The wet time of the season will be sometime in March and April. But again, test bits, the estimated seasonal high water table is based on models, and you don't really need to, it doesn't matter if it's a drought season or if it's a wet season.
Okay, all right. So, but in any event, if somebody wanted to have additional test bits done, it's going to be well within the timing of our hearing process here, because we're going to be going through February and March and April.
Right.
So that's an issue that can be further addressed at some other appropriate time. Thank you for your preliminary presentation. We appreciate, Mr. Mattis.
Thank you.
And Mr. Schomer, who do you have?
Mr. Leonard, I have one other comment. I think it's another issue that needs to be considered. Again, a matter to be considered. There's significant amount of ledge that shows on the existing conditions plan along the easterly boundary line that steps over into the abutting property. I think a detailed analysis of how the ledge would be addressed, how retaining walls would be constructed within that area without affecting property on the other side of that property line. It strikes me that it may be that easements are necessary in order to properly be able to address the ledge and other issues. And the third related comment on that is that the sewer line that's proposed along the easterly property line is set within 1 or 2 feet of the edge of the property. Be very difficult to gain access to maintain that sewer line because it sits between a retaining wall and the next door property line. Be difficult to get access to maintain it without easements for that purpose. So I think those are important considerations the board should look for further details on.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Corcoran. And Mr. Mattos, I know you probably have received Mr. Corcoran's letter and engineering report, but it was only within the last couple of days. And I don't expect you to be able to comment on that at the present time, but let me ask you to just consider Mr. Corcoran's concerns, and I presume that you'll be addressing those issues as part of your more formal presentation. Is that fair to say?
Yes, we'll take that into consideration and review them.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr.
I'm sorry, Mr. Connolly, please.
Mr. Chairman, I think I saw that Mr. Reardon had his hand raised to weigh in here.
Thank you. Yeah.
If it pleases the board, I just had a quick question. It was along the lines of Mr. Corcoran's.
John, let me stop you right there. I don't want to apologize to you because I didn't even know you were present at this hearing. I cannot see any of the pictures of people who were present. And if for whatever reason you had questions or concerns about any of the preliminary testimony of the other experts, please feel free to ask them now. So I didn't mean to.
No apologies necessary. No, just a quick comment about Mr. Corcoran brought up an interesting point about the ledge. Yeah, that is a concern for a couple different reasons. One, for the reason that was stated about the complexities along the boundary and how do you deal with that with the tight fit between the townhouses and the adjacent property. But it was also a concern for me because one of the test pits that was conducted was really close to a noted ledge outcrop, and it was about 9 feet deep, but didn't encounter any ledge. So what I think it would be worthwhile is if the applicant could consider doing a few more test pits to at least identify where that ledge is in where it's trending. And for example, it could even be that they're not actually ledge outcrops. They could just be what are called glacial erratics or just big giant rocks. But it would help kind of resolve some questions I have as well if they did a few more test pits. So that would be great new information.
Great, thank you, Mr. Reardon. Do you have any other questions that you want to pose?
Not right now, thanks.
Okay, let me go back to Mr. Marder. Bear with me. Mr. Matos, will you take into consideration Mr. Reardon's concerns about possibly doing some other test pits and doing some other study or investigation to try to determine where the ledge is trending and where it actually is?
Yeah, we'll take it into consideration.
Great, I appreciate, that's all we can ask. Appreciate very much. Mr. Schomer, do you have your next witness to present?
Yes, I do. Last up tonight, Mr. Chair, is Dan Dumay of MDM Transportation.
Good, welcome to the board, Mr. Dumay.
Thank you. This is Dan Dumay with MDM Transportation Consultants. So we did a full traffic impact and access study. I'll share my screen with the board here.
Thank you.
So you should be seeing as an aerial view with the site. The 2 red dots are the study locations. We focused on the site driveway and the adjacent intersection, Truman Parkway, Brush Hill Road, Amber Road. For a small project like this, there's not a ton of trip generation. So the number of intersections studied is basically just limited to the site. But as you can see, along the Parkway, Brush Hill Road, as that multi-use path, there's also sidewalks on Brush Hill Road. The around 138 on the other side is the MBTA route 716, again connecting up to Mattapan and the other uses. Our study intersections we looked at in the morning, 7 and 9 in the morning. We took the peak 1 hour during that period and kind of looked at that critical time. We also looked at the peak afternoon period, which is a 4 to 6 period for this particular project. Again, the 1 peak hour in the afternoon, the commuters coming home from work period. Our count data, similar to the last project you guys heard last week, was counted pre-COVID, adjusted seasonally as needed. And then for this project, since we adjusted it up to 2021 baseline conditions. Let's go to the next slide here. The Amber Road itself, these are the volumes on a daily basis, about 1,100 vehicles per day. Directional, or total vehicles, 140 vehicles, 2-way flow in the morning, peak hour, and about 90 in the afternoon. It's a pretty low volume roadway. You can see it's probably cut through traffic in the morning, 84% northbound and then 59% southbound coming home in the afternoon, cutting back over to Route 138 in the afternoon. We also collected speed data to the south of the site on the 138 side, away from the influence area of the adjacent Truman Parkway intersection. Regulatory speed limit 25, we got an average speed of 27 and 26, and then an 85th percentile, 32, 33. So it's kind of in line with the regulatory speed, slightly higher 85th percentile speed. Those were used for the sight line and safety evaluations of the driveway on Amore Road. So this first slide here is a stopping sight distance. So it's somebody traveling along Amore Road, stopping with an object 2 feet high at the site driveway itself. You can see we meet the criteria for the 85th percentile speed and turning from the intersection. We clearly meet those sight distances, no problems there. And we looked at the intersection sight distance. So it's the vehicles from 8 to 14.5 feet back exiting onto Amore Road. And again, you have plenty of sight distance to satisfy what we're calling the ideal speed for the regulatory speed limit. So if you pulled out in front of somebody, they wouldn't have to slow down by more than 10% of their speed. So we meet the safety criteria, which is the minimum. And we also meet the ideal, which is more of a operations-based criteria. So the sight lines are adequate at that location. We looked at how many trips it's going to generate. So single-family homes, we looked at 4 units, and then low-rise apartments we used for the townhomes. And total about 9 trips in the morning and 11 in the afternoon, 126 for the day. These were not adjusted for any mode, alternative mode use. We looked at census data for this area, which indicates, given the proximate to the transit, multi-use path, and other accommodations, about 35% of the people in this immediate track use non-single occupant vehicle trips, but there's no discount in the report taken for these uses. These number of trips are very low. You wouldn't even really notice them on the adjacent roads. They would kind of just blend in with the day-to-day traffic. We looked at journey to work. Where are these people going to go to work? Most of the people are going to go, we're going to call the Northeast, Brush Hill Road to the north. And then just a few trips on the other approaches, Amore and Truman Parkway. Again, this is the morning. So about 7 trips to the north, that's the highest use. And then the afternoon, everybody's coming back. Again, Brush Hill Road coming back. So it's well within the day-to-day fluctuations of this one intersection. We'll look at the operations and how it actually operates coming up shortly here. So in terms of, we look at level of service, this top box is the morning. We look at a baseline 21 condition, 2028 no build, just 7 years in the future. Accounts for background projects as well as background growth. And then the 2028 build adds our project traffic on top of that. So you can see the adjacent intersection going from a no build to build, there's 0 increase in delay. It's nominal. Site driveway in Amore is going to be 9 seconds. You basically can't get better than that. It's level of service A. It goes A through F in the category of delay. So it's as good as you can get. And then again in the afternoon, about 13 seconds B exiting. And there's no change there, and the same, there's no delay coming on the driveway. So from a traffic perspective, it's really no increase in traffic. It's inconsequential to the area operations on Amore, as well as the parkway itself. I should say we also looked at the area of the site driveway as well as the Brush Hill Road, Truman Parkway, Amore intersection in terms of safety, in terms of crash review. We looked at Mass DOT data. Last 5 years indicated that it's a below average crash rate location. We recently just went back and looked, and the intersection itself is no longer listed as a high crash location as part of Mass DOT. That's been dropped with the latest data that's just come out in when they went to the new 3-year spread of traffic data. So that intersection is no longer listed within the 5% highest crash locations within the district. So again, there's not a high crash location, below average crash rate. So there's no real safety problems that we need to address at that location at this time. We looked at the Milton ladder truck going to the site. We did a right turn in, going out through the emergency maintenance gate, right turn onto Brush Hill Road. So it can actually go in, doesn't go over any of the parking spaces. And then again, if it was to make a left in, a right in and a right out. So it can do those movements pretty easily. So Again, we'll work with the fire department and the fire chief as we have on the other projects to make sure that he's satisfied with access. But from our perspective, it works pretty nice. This is just kind of a summary of everything I just said. There's about a 35% alternative transportation use in the area. We didn't take any credit in this study. Just add all the trips in. Nominal traffic increases on the area roads and adjacent intersections. No change in level of service compared to conditions without this project projected into the future. They're going to have sidewalks that connect to the building entrance, parking areas, and it's going to connect to the existing sidewalk system on Brush Hill Road and Truman Road, or Truman Parkway. They're going to have bike racks at a couple different locations for residents and visitors. The design meets the safety criteria for the radii emergency vehicles, along with the sight distance criteria for safety. And then they'll maintain the sightline triangles to maintain those sightlines. As we got over before in the beginning of the presentation, there's 31 spaces on the site, 2 spaces per unit for the single family units, and then 1.92 spaces for the townhomes, which is a very adequate parking supply for a residential development of this type. I'll go back to Mr. Schumer, and he'll close out our presentation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tomei. Before we go back to Mr. Schumer, let me just ask our board members whether they have any questions regarding your preliminary presentation.
Sure.
Giselle Jaffer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Dume, for your presentation and for addressing my earlier question concerning emergency access.
Absolutely.
I was wondering if you could give a little bit more background on sort of just the dangerousness and it was sort of a crash site, but now it's not. I noticed that Mass Housing had commented on that, and then the applicant's response was like, that's no longer the case. And I guess most specifically, my question is, did something change? Or is it just sort of data collection and happenstance that it's not now sort of officially a crash site?
Yeah, so what ends up happening is the Mass DOT, they do the highway safety improvement projects. They look at the number of crashes at different intersections throughout the district. And for this particular intersection, what happened is that the 2015 through 2017 data, it was within the top 5% within the state. And then when they came up with the new year, they move it up 2016 to 18. So during that time period, the intersection is no longer listed as a high crash location, which means it's not eligible for the federal funding subject to the road safety audit.
Okay. And is that just based purely on numbers of accidents that occurred?
It's based on the numbers of crashes that occur and also the type of crash. So is it an injury type of crash, fatality, is just a property damage type collision. So they get you get a certain number of points for if it's an injury type of crash versus just a property damage, and then they compare all the intersections through the district.
And Dan, if I can just add, I think that we also looked at this because during the mass housing process, there was a note made that at one time there was a fatal crash further up Brush Hill Road. And as a result of that crash, the rapid rectangular flashing beacons were installed at the crosswalk up there. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, that's up in this region here. Yeah, so what happened, that was I'm not sure if that was included and made it highway HSIP location, given that it's not at the actual intersection itself, but we did review that collision, and there was an unmarked kind of crosswalk and they changed it out to a high visibility crossing with a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. I can pull that up so that everybody can I can walk you through that a little bit. So just to orient everybody, our site is down here at the intersection. So that crash is actually, that fatality was up at this intersection near Aberdeen Road. If everybody can see the street view here. You can see there's the cross was there. This was in July 2017. If we toggle the street view, 2019, it's been addressed with rectangular rapid flashing beacon, actually marked crosswalk, as well as ADA compliant crossing on both approaches, with push buttons over here to activate these rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So back when the crash occurred again, I believe it was in 2016 that occurred, because see, there was no marked crossing here, and there's a little memorial here. So that shouldn't have been included as part of our intersection, but it could have been somehow lumped in with that area. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Giselle, do you have any further questions on traffic issues?
Nothing further. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Brian Connolly, please, if you have any questions.
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tim, do you have any questions of Mr. Dumais?
Yeah, just a quick one. I've been dealing with sort of the fire and emergency vehicle circulation issue on a lot of these different projects, and this one is kind of interesting and different from other projects, because I think what we're talking about on a lot of the other projects is, a secondary access if the primary access is blocked for whatever reason, due to some sort of an emergency circumstance. A lot of those other sites are obviously bigger and kind of account for the circulation of the emergency vehicle kind of getting around the site and getting out through the primary access. This appears like I'm looking at this diagram right now. You're having a fire truck go, in one entrance and out the other entrance, which I think is fine. We'll obviously have Chief Madden take a look at that. But I wanted you to maybe talk through a little bit how you anticipate operationally that kind of gate working, and whether or not there were other treatments that you had considered. I only say that because, the odds of, the secondary access being, or the primary access being blocked and needing to use the emergency access is kind of rather low. But, the odds of there being a sort of an emergency response at this site are kind of greater than that. So, this is going to be something where the fire department's going to have to, operationally know what to do and how to get through, if they respond to the site, in any circumstance.
Yeah, so the idea on this site was we looked at different options of having the Brush Hill Road as a full access. We looked at it maybe a one-way out, a one-way in. We came up with the best solution, we believe, to keep all the cars south on Amar Road, and then have the emergency gate where they'd have to go all the way through. Embark may be able to expand upon what type of gate system we're going to have, and we can talk with Chief Madden as well on what type of system he'd like to see there, so that you could get quick access to it if they need to come on a routine call and not have to back out.
Yeah, we'll like I said, we'll obviously kind of deal with this, and the chief may have no problem. I just, in my experience, when we talk about a gate, it's sometimes, the circumstance, the fire truck just blasts through it because, they've got to, get in because the building's burning down. But, if you've got a situation where, the sprinkler goes off because someone, put a slice of pizza on the burner, they're not going to want to blast through that gate. So it's got to be something that they can kind of get in and out in a relatively simple fashion. But we can address that, at a later time. I just wanted to flag that, and I'll be flagging that for the chief.
I concur. That's a great comment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Tim. Sean Reardon, do you have any questions of Mr. Dumais?
Yeah, just a quick question. Actually, I had two questions, but they were just sort of answered. But Dan, so if a person from this site wanted to get across Truman Parkway, the only place nearby to do that safely is Aberdeen Street?
That's the closest one to the north.
How about to the south?
I can look that up for you.
I guess the thing that we need to consider is, the practical expectation of having a kid or an adult walk that far in either direction, as opposed to trying to go across Truman Parkway at what has been a difficult situation or difficult intersection in the past. I think we got to think a little bit more aggressively about options on site, given that, that's a pretty hairy thing to do.
Yeah, so it does look like there's one close to the south, so they'd have to go up to the north to cross over to that multi-use path. Currently, anyway.
Even if they wanted to go south on that multi-use path?
If they want to cross the street to the other side, they can stay on, they can cross Amar Road or cross Brush Hill, and then there's a sidewalk on Truman Parkway itself on, we're going to call the southern side, but to get to that multi-use path, they would have to go to the north.
Okay.
Or they'd have to go, I think it's pretty far down to cross closer to the, like Fairmont Avenue, it kind of looks like. I haven't looked at very much detail down that far, but I believe that's.
I guess my message is just to the development team, just consider the sort of the practical applications there. And then one other quick thing to Tim's comments, it's very atypical to have a locked gate as part of the routine emergency access. I'd go so far as to say I've never seen it before, where we're asking a emergency vehicle to get out and open a gate just to make a routine access. So that would be something that I'd ask you guys to take a look at again too as well.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean. I appreciate it very much. Mr. Corcoran, do you have any preliminary questions of Mr. Dumais?
Yes, and it again parallels sort of this crosswalk, safe access across Truman Highway and Brush Hill Road. This is an unsignalized intersection. Truman Highway, as I understand, is a very high-speed roadway. And I'm wondering whether you've evaluated operations on the ground and observed the type of turns and the speed at which turns are made from Truman Highway onto Amor Road, crossing traffic that's coming from Brush Hill Road onto going from the Brush Hill Road stop sign going north, and from Amor Road, Truman Highway going south, and then turning either into Amor Road and Brush Hill Road, and whether you should be considering safe signaling for that intersection to provide for safe pedestrian access across what I think is 6 lanes of traffic to get to the Ponce River Trail on the other side. The other issue, I think, at that location, that trail may be fenced, and access to it may be difficult. So that's another thing I think you might want to consider. How do you address the sort of attractive nuisance, if you will, for people trying to cross from this project to that trail?
Mr. Dumais, do you want to comment on Ned's questions, or do you want to just reserve that for your larger testimony?
I think we can reserve it, but in general, we did look at the intersection in terms of speeds, the movements through the intersection, how you come south on Brush Hill Road, you do a kind of a 2-stage gap, you go into that middle break area, you wait there, you get across the lanes, and you either go down Brush Hill no more. Then likewise coming out, we didn't really see any overall conflicts. It is kind of a wide open intersection. We'll have to look at more detail and figure out, kind of work in with the proper authorities to see if that's even a place you'd want pedestrians to cross. I'm not sure you'd want to promote crossing at that location. You probably want them to go up to the north of the other location, even though it's a little bit out of the way. So we'll take a look at those in a little more detail, and as we move forward, we'll try to address as many as we can.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Schomer, I think, do you have any other witnesses to present?
That's it from us tonight, Mr. Chair. That concludes our testimony.
Okay, that's great. Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we adjourn this particular hearing?
Well, just, for the benefit of everybody who's listening, this is obviously the first night of this hearing, and I'll use the phrase that's everyone's least favorite. This is an iterative process, and we'll go through that process with Mr. Reardon and with the other peer reviewers and with the town department heads to try to tie down all of these issues to the best we can. And I think that these are all resolvable issues. They're issues that we're aware of, and we're looking forward to going through the process. So with that, I think that concludes our remarks tonight, Mr. Chair. Just a question, if I may, in terms of the board's pleasure for the next hearing and what topic you'd like to hear. My suggestion would be architecture, and I don't know if, I assume Mr. Bomer from Davis Square Architects will also be the peer reviewer on this project as he has been on some of the other ones. I don't know if he's had an opportunity to review this yet and is ready to provide comments, but we're certainly interested in his feedback as well as Mr. Rudin's as well.
Great. It's my understanding that Mr. Bomer is the peer reviewer on architecture, and that's probably a great way to start. I'll check with Judy Barrett as to the status of any peer review comments that he may have.
I think, Mr. Chair, I think he's reviewed it. Hi. I think he's reviewed it, but he hasn't written anything up yet. I'll talk to him tomorrow.
Okay. Did you hear the colloquy before we, I think perhaps before you were present, that we were talking about scheduling for the next hearing?
I picked up some of that. I've been on for a while, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
Well, thank you. I wish I could see some pictures of who's in the audience, because it's somewhat mysterious. But we were talking about, because Mr. Conley has some issues with school vacation week, of having our next hearing on Tuesday, March 8th at 7 o'clock. So that may give Mr. Bomer sufficient time to secure any written comments that he may want to submit to the board.
Tuesday, the 8th?
Yes.
Okay, I'll email him now. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. So let me just ask my board members whether they have any other thing that they want to either bring up or discuss before we adjourn the meeting. Giselle Jofford, do you have any issues you want to discuss?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. Mr. Brian Conley, please.
Nothing else from me.
And Tim Szynski, do you have any issues that you want to bring up?
I don't, but you may want to check in with Bev and see if there's anyone from the public that is here to make any comments.
Yeah, well, generally, I don't get involved having the public to discuss issues on a preliminary basis. I'll ask, but I don't intend to be here an hour and a half on the preliminary presentations.
Sorry I said anything then.
Oh, no, you don't have to be sorry. I'm glad you spoke up. There may be some people, but as I say, I usually don't hear the public on preliminary matters. But Bev, is there anybody out there in virtual land who has their hand up and wants to ask a question?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
There's no one.
Mr. Corcoran, do you have any further comments before we adjourn?
No, I just want to confirm that the next hearing on the 8th would be, March 8th would be focused on architecture.
Yes, and I think probably, let me just ask Mr. Schomer. Mr. Schomer, do you expect the architectural testimony back and forth, if we can have Mr. Bomer here, would take the entire evening, or would you contemplate introducing any additional evidence other than architecture?
I would suggest that we focus just on architecture for the first night.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I just want to make sure we're in sync. So if there's no further comment by anybody, Bev, are you all set to adjourn?
I am.
Okay, great. So by agreement of the parties, we're going to adjourn this particular hearing to be resumed on Tuesday, March 8th at 7 p.m. for a discussion of the architectural issues involved in this case. And I certainly want to thank.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, do we also confirm the site walk?
We haven't, and Mr. Schomer's going to have to talk with his people and see when they're available, and we'll circulate something through Beverly Sutton and make sure that everyone is, including you, is available to go on the site visit. We'll try to do it as soon as we can, but we may be 2 to 3 weeks out. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think next Saturday would work fine for us. I put it out to my team to speak now or forever hold their peace, as it were, and nobody got in touch with me.
So you mean a week from this Saturday?
Yeah.
Okay, what's that date, Bev? Do you have a calendar there? A week from Saturday.
I have it, February 12th.
Thank you.
Okay, it's February 12th. And
Yep.
that would probably be at
Sorry.
1 or 1:30. Giselle, are you free on the 12th at, let's say, 1 o'clock or 1:30?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Is 1:30 materially better for you, easier for you than 1 o'clock?
It is.
Okay, so we'll suggest 1:30. And Brian Conley, how are you on the 12th at the subject property at 1:30 for the site?
That's fine.
That's fine with you.
Yep.
And Mr. Corcoran, how about you?
That works great. Thank you.
And Mr. Reardon, are you going to attend the site visit or not?
I don't need to, and it's my anniversary, so.
Are you shaving between now and then?
I did. It came back.
You did.
Okay, and Tim, is that okay with you, the site visit on the 12th?
I've been to the site enough.
Okay.
You can figure it out without me. Thank you though.
So what we'll do is, Bev, will you please advertise a site visit at the subject property on February 12th at 1:30 in the afternoon?
Absolutely. And then the next hearing is March 8th.
Yeah, the next hearing, we'll continue this hearing. We're going to adjourn this hearing now and to be resumed on March 8th, which is a Tuesday at 7 p.m. And I want to thank you, Mr. Schomer, for having all of the people present. Thank them for their presentations. They were very helpful. I think it gives us some oversight and overview as to what the project is and helps us to focus on the issues. And look forward to seeing everybody at the next hearing on March 8th and possibly some people on February 12th at the view. So with all of that.
Mr. Chairman, just before we adjourn, just to make sure I have right, we're on a 3-week cycle. So the tentative schedules would be March 16th and then April 6th. Would those be the March 8th, March 16th, and April 6th?
Well, after the
Is that right?
After the hearing on the 8th, just bear with me because I have my chart here. I think the next hearing is on the 16th of March and on the April 6th.
Great.
Okay, then we're gonna stay with that.
Great.
Unless something comes up.
Mr. Chair, I can update that schedule and distribute it to the board through Bev, just so that everyone's got it. I know that you do, but it may be good for Giselle and Brian to have it in their hands as well. So I'll do that tomorrow morning.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks for for putting this together. This is a tedious and but an important benefit to have for the planning of these hearings. And I appreciate your kind assistance. It makes everything a lot easier for Beverly and for the board. So there we are, folks. We're adjourned for the evening to resume on March 8th, Tuesday, March 8th at 7 p.m. And we have a site visit at the subject property, 16 Amer Road, February 12th at 1:30 in the afternoon. I will say weather permitting, but let's hope the gods are favorable to us. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for your presentation and your time, and look forward to seeing you again for the continuation of this hearing. Have a good night.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.